Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show sponsored by 888 Sport. I'm your host George Elek, and today I'm joined by two expert tipsters, Andy Holding and Rory Delargy, as we look at day one of the Cheltenham Festival. It is back, the fans are back, and this is your Tuesday preview. We'll be looking at all 7 races on the card, including the Supreme, the Arkle, the Champion Hurdle and the Mares Hurdle. But before I speak to the guys about their selections and their tips, we were lucky enough to be joined earlier, Andy and I, by 888 Sport ambassador Barry Geraghty as we take a trip down memory lane and look ahead at his thoughts on day one of the festival. Yeah, superb to be joined by 888 Sport ambassador Barry Geraghty himself as we preview the first day, the Tuesday of the Cheltenham Festival. And so much is made, Barry, about the first day, the roar before the Supreme. Where as a punter, as a fan, whether you're watching it on the sofa, watching it on course, it's incredibly exciting. What's it like as a jockey, going from your early days down at Presby Park to 2020, your final day there? What's it like arriving at the course, that sense of anticipation and jumping off for the first?
I would just arriving on Cheltenham any day, but especially obviously the first day of the festival. The anticipation, the anxiety, everything. It's just, the buzz is unbelievable. And you're usually there at maybe 10:30 or 11 o'clock. So there's a good build up. But as you come in and you just make that turn to the start to face the tape in the Supreme and you hear that roar, it probably goes over your head in your early years because you're not expecting it so much. But as you get a little bit older and you can savor the moment, it's a magic moment because it symbolizes the kickstart of what's an amazing week.
With the Supreme, you mentioned they're inexperienced jockeys. It is incredible that the moment that all the build-up leads towards is, at the end of the day, a race between a lot of inexperienced horses who've never seen anything like the field sizes and the crowds that you get for the Supreme and for the Cheltenham Festival. We talk about how that might impact certain horses in the Supreme. Is it difficult? I mean, how do you manage that issue in terms of the inexperienced horses in that first race?
Yeah, well, I suppose getting on them quietly. I would have always found, get on your horse quietly, keep them calm, get them to post as relaxed as possible. But some horses you mightn't have any say in that because they could be just wired to the moon, both because they're primed for the day, but then the occasion adds to that as well. So different horses react differently. If we're talking about this year's Supreme, Constitution Hill, you'd imagine will be fairly relaxed, where you would expect to see John Bon on edge. So it's those preliminaries can take a lot out of a horse, but also a jockey as well. And I suppose the moments that I would remember in my career was going to post in the Arkle for Sprinter Sacre, I think it was 2012. And for me, the whole festival surrounded him. And just going to post, second race, and I'm hacking down and I'm thinking, wow, we're here already. The festival's just started and this is the big moment. And then just snapping out and saying, no, it's just a horse race, keep it simple. And I think you need that. You need that clarity of mind just to put all the noise, all the razzmatazz out of your mind and just focus on the simplicity of what it is. It's a horse race, and do your best for yourself and your horse.
Barry, Andy, is there any danger as a jockey riding in the Supreme that you can get almost dragged along and carried away with the sort of noise reverberating around the Cotswold Hills? I mean, you can hear it at the top of the hill, and obviously the fans react to the commentary, and obviously there's a roar, there's an anticipation. Is there sometimes a case as a jockey you could kick too soon because you're being reactionary with what's going on, the noises around you, or do you just have to stay focused on what you're doing?
Well, that's probably the difference, is staying focused, and your experienced rider, or you could have an inexperienced rider who's a cool head. You won't so much hear the roar, top of the hill, facing the third last, but that whole, the build up, everything, your blood is up, you're pumping. So it's just having the cool head in that moment, just to say, no, not yet, wait another little bit longer. So some riders will get sucked into that. But obviously the more experienced, the cooler heads, the fellow who really knows, our lady for that matter, what their plan is and are sticking to it. But you have the pace of the race. For me, Cheltenham, that's what sets it apart, is because the pace of certain parts of the race dictates where you need to be. And it's the rider who understands all of those things and can take everything into account. And Rachel did it brilliantly last year. We all refer to right place, right time. But right place, right time comes from the pace. So if the early pace says you need to be further back than mid-div, and then as the pace would drop, turning away from the winning post with a second to go, you can creep into a position. It can roll on again down the hill away from the stands. You might need to just be happy to fall back another few positions. Then it steadies again on the climb up past the ditch. You can start trying to creep in again. It's all position. And the change in pace through the race dictates where you need to be. And that's what the best riders, keeping it simple, right place, right time, and just understanding Cheltenham.
We talk about there being bigger crowds for the Cheltenham Festival. I think there are bigger crowds for these podcasts and videos on the Oddschecker betting show than we get for the rest of the year. We know we'll be welcoming lots of new viewers and listeners to this, but those who've been listening every week, a few people out there might have some decent anti-post tickets for Constitution Hill in the first at big prices such as 40s and 33s after you gave a positive mention for him a few months ago now. For those who are just tuning in for the first time, tell us about your special relationship with the favourite in the Supreme.
Myself and Warren Ewing, a good friend of mine, we bought him as a foal. I kept him here at home for 3 years. We broke him, we pre-trained him, and he was so relaxed and so quiet. The kids, all three of our kids even had a sitting him at one stage, and there's a video out there of all our middle child. So she was 9 at the time, and she's trotting around the arena on him as a 3-run, which is unheard of, but that's how relaxed he is. His work was always very good as when we had him, when he went into training. I was recommending him to everyone, but thankfully Michael Buckley took me up on it, and he purchased him, and he's been blazing, going great guns in 7 barrels since then.
Barry, that's got to be there for a massive advantage, isn't it? Going into a race like the Supreme, like I say, with 50,000 racegoers there, there's going to be a crackling atmosphere, particularly in the parade ring beforehand. It's the first race for 2 years when fans have been in the ground. So you've got, obviously, temperament's going to be a massive part of it. But judged by what you're saying and what Nicky said about him, he basically sleeps, eats and repeats, isn't he? So he's got the ideal constitution mentally and obviously physically as well.
Yeah, exactly, and it counts for so much, especially as a young horse at the festival. And maybe in years to come, he might be too lazy and too laid back, but at the minute, it's definitely a massive benefit to be in the saddling boxes beforehand. You're going to have a buzz around. There's going to be noise. There's excitement. These are youngsters, and it's going to affect them. So you need a horse, ideally, who's going to be relaxed and just not fazed by the occasion.
Andy, we're going to be talking to yourself and Rory Delargy previewing this race in just a few minutes. So I don't want to get all your thoughts, but if Constitution Hill in this stellar Supreme field does what he's done or builds on that, where would you rank him in terms of the most exciting prospects to come through this race in recent years?
I think just in him in isolation, you'd already be looking towards next year's Champion Hurdle and thinking, okay, let's get the Supreme out of the way first. But he's that kind of horse. He's that good. I mean, his technique over his hurdles, it's a fairly small sample size. He's only jumped 16, but he hasn't made a mistake at any of them. But it's that turn of foot that he's got, George. I mean, Barry will know as well. I think he's the one horse in the lineup that we know has got a deadly turn of foot. And it's not just a turn of foot off a slow pace. He's actually been tested when they've gone a good gallop, which is obviously the sign of a very good horse. Time figure wise, there's other horses on par with him on the numbers, i.e., your Dysart Dynamos and your Sir Gerhards. But they've done it from the front when they've gone a relentless gallop and burnt a lot off. This fella, he's totally different. He'll sit in behind. He's going to be the stalk and pounce horse. If he's there 2 out and he's still going well, he has got that turn of foot in his locker, I think, that might just make the difference.
We'll find out more on your thoughts on the Supreme in a second there. But you mentioned the Champion Hurdle. And before we let you go, Barry, we've got to talk about the Champion Hurdle. 4 horses you won the Champion Hurdle on. I'm going to quickly test Andy to see if he can remember all 4 before we ask you to remember those.
I think Punjabi was the first. Bouvedere. And...
2 more.
2 more. Jeski.
Very good.
Struggling with the third.
2020. Just 2
years
ago.
The mare, Epitome.
There you go. That's why he does what he does.
Goodness me.
Stanley, top marks.
Which is the one that stands out in your mind as being, I'm not going to ask you to choose your favourite Champion Hurdle winner, but which one sticks out as being the happiest memory? Is it the first Punjabi, or was it the one just a couple of years ago, Epitome, or one of those in the middle?
Being honest, it's hard to choose. Epitome was really special because it was right last year, and I knew that going into the festival, and to get a winner on the first day and for it to be one of the features, to get that in the bag, I was ecstatic, really was. Then if I look at the others, Jesky, who I have a great connection with Jessica Harrington over the years, and her husband Johnny was very unwell with cancer and passed away shortly after. That was a brilliant victory. And Punjabi, the first one, I've been second in the champion hurdle in Max Joy. I was probably about 30 at this stage. And I was just wondering, was I ever going to win the champion hurdle? Because I was lucky enough to have won all the other main events. So I thought this one might slip through me then. So yeah, they were all special days, really, for different reasons. And it's you're just a champion hurdle or any of those. Any winner in Cheltenham is, no matter what it is, that's how much it means. It's hard to split them.
Do you think Appreciate can serve it up Tiny Suckle this year?
I really do. I do. I think she's a very, very good mare. She hasn't had to beat a superstar yet, but that doesn't mean she isn't a superstar herself. But this fella, I loved him last season. He got better and better as the year went. I thought his performance in the Supreme was electric. I was looking forward to him as being the novice chaser, the standout horse as a novice chaser this season. Willie is really happy with how he's gone about it. I was in Navan on Saturday and we were chatting about it. The fact that he doesn't have to worry about him coming out of a hard race. He's going there straight. He doesn't have to worry about the bounce factor. He feels he's got him where he wants him. David Casey rides him on his work. He's happy with him. They've no concern about schooling, so they are his jumping. So that was the only slight concern I had was the lack of match practice, and that is no concern to the Mullins camp. So I think he's a big player. He's the toughest assignment she's been handed.
Yeah, it's really interesting to say that, because I, like you, Barry, thought with Appreciated that he's going to be in his favour. The fact that he hasn't had a hard season, he's going to go in there fresh. But it's amazing. I was looking at the stats to find out if any horse has won without a prep run, and in the 95-year history of the Champion Hurdle, no horse has ever won without a prep run, which is quite extraordinary, isn't it, really? So he's got to defy history.
I suppose the closest I got was my 10 to yours when he was second to Annie Power. I think he'd been off nearly 2 years before that. He did give a blow, but he'd been off, and that's a long, long time. It can be interesting, but if you're talking value, there is obviously the mare is very skinny at her price. She's facing a very good horse on him. There's a little bit of value on him. Would you have a few quid in him each way and cover yourself, I wonder, Andy?
I think if anyone's going to break a tradition or a history like that, it's going to be Willie Mullins, isn't it?
Also, it's where history is made. It's the Cheltenham Festival.
Exactly,
that's what it's all about. Barry, finally on Tuesday's preview, what would be your nap of the day? What would be the one bet you'd have if we were to give you a free tenner?
Free tenner. Well, I suppose my heart would be in Constitution Hill. I think he's obviously very good. He's a worthy favourite, but it's a strong race. But I'd say I'd oppose the mare would appreciate it. Roll the dice.
Pose the mare would appreciate it. Thank you very much to 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty there. We're going to talk to Barry in our Wednesday, Thursday and Friday previews at the top of the show, so do check them out as well. Speak to you soon, Barry.
Cheers, Barry. Thank you.
Always great to catch up with the legend, the Cheltenham Festival legend that is 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty, and getting his thoughts. But now it is time to get the thoughts of Andy and Rory ahead of Tuesday's racing. But before we get into it, a reminder that oddschecker is the only tip that you need for the Cheltenham Festival. It's under a week away now, and if you're having a bet, you'll get the most out of it by using oddschecker. Compare odds and find the best special offers for every single race. Right, this is it, the beginning of the mammoth record, and it is the Supreme Novice Hurdle that we're going to start with. Probably the race that we have spoken about the most on the oddschecker betting show so far this year, and at the back end of last year as well. Of course, all these odds I'm going to be reading out are, well, mainly no run and no bet as well, with plenty still left in who might not run. And Sir Gerhard at the moment looks like one of those. He's joint favourite with Constitution Hill, both 9-4. Dysart Dynamo is 11-4. John Bon 9-2. Kilcroot 7-1. Mighty Potter 10-1. Stateman 16s. Fabiolo 16-1. 20-1 Bar. And Rory, before we get into the crux of the racing, we should mention, given this is the first race we're going to preview, the most important thing with the festival often is the weather and the rain. What are we anticipating? We're recording this just before midday on Thursday, so just 5 days until the festival starts. How's it looking to be on Tuesday?
Well, the weather's looking remarkably good. I looked a couple of weeks ago and thought we were going to get a lot of rain, and we could be, starting on very soft ground, but most of that rain has disappeared. There's spits and spots over the weekend that I can see, and the weather site that I use that I find tends to be most accurate is suggesting that Almost unbroken sunshine the day before the festival starts. A little bit overcast on Tuesday, but temperatures up to 13 or 14 degrees suggest the ground is going to be drying out to the extent that we may well have watering before the festival starts. So if like a friend of mine, if you punted on soft ground and stuck half of your balance on that to kick off your festival, you might be in a bit of trouble.
So the first tip of the show is wear sunglasses if you're going to the racecourse on Tuesday. Andy, let's look at the Supreme. You're someone who, with your time figures and your speed ratings and the rest of it, your record in these novice hurdles when you're ranking horses who've only run a couple of times is very good. I've read out the prices there. Let's make it pretty simple. Who's the one you want to be with at this stage?
Well, there's 28 races, isn't it, throughout the course of the week, so we don't want to peak too soon. But I think we're in danger of self-combusting here with this race. Plus the fact that the crowd's going to be even more electric than normal. The anticipation is going to be at full throttle. Bookmakers are going to be wanting to take your money. They're going to be giving you special odds, special dispensations and extra place terms. So it's a race really to get stuck into quite heavily. If you haven't already had a bet, like you have, of course. We won't mention the price, but you're in a really good position on Constitution Hill, who, as we've talked about several times on the podcast that we've done, is the best UK horse by quite some way, certainly based on the time figures anyway that we've got. Funny enough, his best performance was the first one on the clock when he beat Mai Tai. That day he was spectacular. He really announced himself as a novice of some repute. And then he was quite rightly favoured for the Tolworth. Back to the same track, similar ground, and he was just as good. Probably didn't beat a deep grade 1 field. There's been horses that have come out of it and boosted the form a little bit further down the line. But it was just the manner in which he's achieved those victories. He's got that huge turn of foot, which hasn't probably necessarily been seen with the other horses yet. They've gone a really good gallop from the front. The Geraghty ground them into submission at the Dublin Racing Festival. Dysart Dynamo clocked a big number in the Moscow Flyer, again from the front, grinding his opponents into the ground. This fella's totally different. He's a Stork and Pounds horse. He'll just sit in behind. He's going to get a strongly run race, which he's already proven in already. So it gives Nico de Boinville licence really just to kind of try, to ride a race in off the speed. That's certainly the way I see it. I don't think the other horses have quite got the electric change of gear that he showed. I mean, he's shown that turn of foot as well in heavy ground. So he's going to get the better of the ground on the first day. I think it'll probably be still good to soft, so there's going to be plenty of ease in it. He's just probably got about pretty much everything you look for, plus the fact that he's got a bomb-proof temperament. We've listened to Barry about him being a lamb at home. Nicky Henderson says, he's basically fast asleep in his box, isn't he, most of the time? So I think you've got to emphasise that as well. The likes of Dysart Dynamo, who's obviously a free-going sort, so Gerhard, he's potential to perhaps, get a little bit hot as well. John Bond's not quite, he's got a bit warm on the odd occasion. So those other three horses, his main market rivals, all have to have their sort of enthusiasm checked. We're presuming that Sir Gerhard will go for the other race, so that's probably one option that he hasn't got to face out of the way. There's lots of other horses you can fancy from an each perspective. I know Rory will talk about Three Stripe Life, a horse that I like. Chased home Sir Gerhard, of course, last time out. You don't want to rule out Mighty Potter as well, who's a Grade 1 winner. So good strength in depth, should be a decent size field, but ultimately I think the pace that they'll go and the way that this race will develop should really suit Constitution Hill to be bang there 2 out and then turning for home. Hopefully that turn of foot that he showed on his last 2 wins up a hill at Sandown will be the end product in the Super. And that's the way I see it anyway. Getting goosebumps hearing you say that, Andy. Imagining not long to wait now. Rory, how do you see it?
Andy's absolutely spot on with the tactics of the race and the way it will set up. And that's, of all the jockeys riding in the race, Nico de Boinville will be happiest with the potential setup there, because his horse wants to stalk and produce a turn of foot. And a couple of his main dangers want to go from the front, and one of them, John Bond, has gone from the front because he's kind of been forced to do that, but that won't happen on the day. I think he'd be happier sitting in behind the leaders as well. But it looks like it's going to be a really strongly run race, so there should be no hard luck stories. And Constitution Hill, if he handles the different scenario there, the concern with him is that he's he's only had 2 races of any sort in his career. They've both come on soft or heavy ground at Sandown, and Cheltenham's a very different track. So his inexperience concerns me. I think he's the best horse in this race. But I think if you look back through results of the Supreme over the last 20 years, you see a lot of best horses in the race getting beaten. And you know, there's a classic example of when Alpha Off won. Alpha Off, a very good horse, but the 3 horses who followed him home were all better hurdlers than him. But the way the race panned out that day suited him and suited his jockey. And maybe that will actually work well for Constitution Hill. But the fact that you do need to be very savvy in this race, you need to be able to ride the bumps and be able to overcome potential issues in running, means that his inexperience is a bit of a concern. Now, I know Nicky Henderson has come here to the Supreme several times in the past with horses with almost identical profiles, but I think this is a tougher race to win than it was 20 years ago. Everything has got experience. You get a lot of horses coming through the point-to-point field, which is beneficial to them. A lot of horses coming through strong bumpers, and that's, you know, that hardens them up and means that they're not lacking in any kind of know-how. They're novices in name only, essentially. Whereas he really is a novice with just those 2 runs. He's clearly exceptional, and for Nicky Henderson to say he's the most extraordinary horse I've seen in years is a remarkable statement from a man who's had so many absolute superstars through his hands just in the last decade. So I've got no issue with him potentially being, you know, the absolute superstar in this race, but that doesn't guarantee him a win here in what's going to be a tough contest.
So who would you be siding with at the prices at the moment?
Well, I'm inclined to go. I'm not a massive fan of John Bon, and I can see the chances of those in single-figure prices. But the one that I've backed for the race at much bigger odds is 3 Stripe Life. Now, obviously, he was behind Sir Gerhard last time out, and he was beaten in the Grade 1 by Mighty Potter at Christmas. But he shaped very well in both of those races. He was probably a little bit unlucky not to win actually on the first occasion. And I thought the Leopardstown Grade 1 was the best novice hurdle I've seen this season. With Sir Gerhard, now he was a little bit leery early on, but I thought he was very, very impressive in the end. 3 Stripe Life was a clear second, and Colonel Mustard was third. And they were miles clear of a good field. They pulled an awfully long way clear. And I just think that's exceptionally strong form. So 3 Stripe Life has become a big price because he's been put in his place twice in theory. But I think he's always going to run a big race in a contest like this. I think the stronger the pace they go, the more it will suit him as well. And he'll be running onto the line. So I think he can easily hit the frame. At the moment, you're only getting 3 places, but I think you're almost certainly going to get 4 places on the day. And he would appeal at 20 to 1 or bigger at those kind of prices.
Yeah, 3 Stripe Life 20 to 1 as it stands at the moment. As you say, just 3 places at the moment, but sure to be 4, I mean, possibly even 5, depending on how many go down there. Do check the oddschecker app or online to see the place terms. Just a quick question for you, because it's something I've heard a couple of people say when trying to argue against the case of the Constitution Hill and Dysart Dynamo, almost saying that the fact that neither have come off the bridle yet is almost a negative, where, you know, you talk about experienced horses and wanting to have that, whereas you've got a John Bond who was made to work for his win last time. Do you fall into the camp as that being just a sign of how good they've been so far, or would you have liked to see them, because, you know, it's very unlikely we're going to see one of these win hard held coming up on Tuesday?
I think it's just the nature of novice hurdles, isn't it, and the very dynamics of them. And the fact that they have been so good that they haven't come off the bridle. I mean, you could argue that that, you know, with their respective run styles, that's led that to happen. Dysart Dynamo just got to the front and nothing could go with him. Hence the fact he didn't come off the bridle at Punchestown. And with Constitution Hill, he hasn't had an opponent yet of that ilk to run against. But at least he's, like I say, he's shown a push button turn of foot. The others have done it in very different ways, haven't they? Sir Gerhard, John Bond. Yeah. I mean, John Bond's come off the bridle, so that's good for him. If you're a fan of John Bond, and there's plenty who still are. I actually think that was his best run, even though he was workmanlike.
I'd agree with that.
Certainly on with regards to time figures, that was definitely his best run. Albeit I don't think the form's quite as good as the other. I mean, don't forget when Dysart Dynamo won the Moscow Fly. He did it in a very fast time, but he beat a horse who, you know, was placed in a shallow hurdle. He was no muppet, the Gordon Elliott horse that he beat. So I think like I say, I think we're dealing with a very, very high standard of horse here. The fact that Kilcrut, we haven't mentioned him, you know, second in a champion bumper, winner of a Grade 1 bumper, he's sort of 4th or 5th in the betting. And he has got a bit to find on the figures, but he's no muppet either. So this is a proper heat. One, I think that, you know, we're not overplaying, you know, just because it is the first race and we're getting carried away. We're not. This is the best novice hurdle I think I've seen at the festival to kick off at least the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, in stark contrast to last year's, what ended up being a procession really for Appreciate It, and a race that lacked any depth and was a pretty small field as well.
And I think it's indicative as well that Sir Gerhard, he would be, and any other year, he'd be a short price favourite to win this race. I think the only reason they're looking to split them up is because they've got Kilcrook, they've got Dysart Dynamo, and they're thinking, well, it's no point running Sir Gerhard and Dysart Dynamo against each other because they're both free goers from the front. So they're taking each other on. So I think they've had to withdraw one of them and think, well, which one's going to be the best suited to perhaps dominating in the Ballymore? And they probably think, well, Dysart Dynamo is more a natural 2-miler, same as Kilcrook, you know, look at his breeding, etc. And I think it's almost process elimination. They've ended up with Sir Gerhard. I think that's the only decision they've made, and it's a tough one at the same time, isn't it?
Right, 27 races
it's not
to go.
been made yet.
No, it's not.
Well,
It's not in tablets of stone.
We should
either.
say, because people will be watching, listening to this in a few days' time before Tuesday's racing, and you know, at the moment it looks like Sir Gerhard, looking at the exchange prices, will be running in the Ballymore, but we don't know that for sure, and things can change.
Yeah, a lot of
Mr.
people were
Mullins
surprised
pretty quickly.
when York Hill went Ballymore, and I think a lot of people were surprised when Champagne Fever went Supreme, and then won a very good Supreme as well, beating Champion Hurdle horse. And talking about how you're talking about this maybe being the best Supreme in 20 years, but it's not that long ago we had Altior beating Min, beating Bouverdere,
yeah.
and then I've already mentioned Alpha Off beating Spirit Sun, beating Sprinter Sacra, beating Q Card.
Yeah,
that was the first 4 home. So if this is as good as either of those, then it's an absolute cracker.
Absolutely. Well, it will certainly make for an interesting start to the festival, as will the Arkle, the second race on the cards. Edwardstone leading the charge, hopefully looking to make it 2-0 to Great Britain in the Presbytery Cup after Constitution Hill wins the first. Edwardstone is 5-2. That's the last time I mentioned Constitution Hill in these pods. Blue Lord is 7-2. Rivière de Tell 4-1. Horton Couleur 7-1. Saint Sam 8. Course Sublime 14 with Magic Days 16-1 bar. And Andy, you've been banging the Rivière de Tell drum on this show for the past couple of months. 4-1 now, just a tiny bit bigger than Blue Lord at 7-2. Anything changing your mind, or are you still in that camp?
I am looking at this race a little bit with a view of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because having already backed Rivière de Tell, I'm still adamant that she's probably got the best form coming in here. I'll put it this way, if Fernie Hollow was in this race here, I think he'd be an even money chance. And he beat Rivière de Tell only narrowly at the first Leopardstown meeting over Christmas. And that time figure that day suggested to me that was the best novice chase we'd seen so far this season, either side of the RSC. Rivière de Tell prior to that run had clocked a phenomenal time figure at Navan. I actually fancied her strongest to beat Fernie Hollow. And it was only by a narrow margin she failed to justify that belief. She was just a little bit slightly novice-y here, there and everywhere. I think the ditch down the back straight 4 out, she just lost the length here, then everywhere, and it gave the advantage to the Mullins runner. But she stuck her head down, she stayed on strongly all the way to the line. That was the first time that she'd actually been ridden in behind as well. She dominated the first 3 races. So it shows that she can come off the pace. They rode her similarly last time out, the Dublin Racing Festival behind St Sam, went a really good gallop. Her jumping up until the last was absolutely flawless. She met everything in her stride. She measured every fence. Looked very, very assured. And then she just saw a long stride at the last. Jack Kennedy sat on her, and she just took off in his hands and dived at it. She, from being a length and a half in front and still not fully extended, she came out away from the fence a length behind. Couldn't quite get back up again, but she was definitely rallying to the cause, and I think she would have beaten Blue Lord comfortably had she jumped the last, in a better fashion. And I was surprised after the race as well that they adjusted Blue Lord to a 3-1 favourite, and they went like 5-1 Riviere de Tel, which to my eyes seemed bizarre because I thought Riviere de Tel was by far away the best horse in the race. I think she'll turn around the form with Blue Lord, who I thought jumped a little bit indifferently at Leopardstown, and I think he only won it because Riviere de Tel chucked it away. So I think she represents because they're the best form. The Irish Arkle is usually one of the best races, if not the best. And the run behind Fernie Hollow on the numbers suggests that she represents that form in a pretty solid way. Again, I think this race is going to be strongly run. Rory will back that up as well. You've got For Pleasure in there, you've got Magic Days in there, you've got Gabby Nacco. I think they're going to go quite hard on him. So you've got plenty of pace on up the front, and it'll allow something like a Riviere de Tel, obviously it's going to play into the strengths of Edwardstown as well, but Riviere de Tel to wait in behind like she has been. I really do fancy her, she's probably one of the ones I'm the most quietly confident about without really shouting it from the rooftops that she's going to win this. So I think, look, whatever beats her, I think I'll win, put it like that. So yeah, big fan of Riviere de Tel.
Sounds like a bit of a shout from the rooftops here. I think that's over now. Rory, how do you see the Arkle?
Well, we discussed Riviere de Tel at Christmas, and I think we both came to the conclusion at that stage that she was a great each-way bet for the Arkle because she was a surprisingly big price at that stage. You knew she was going to go for it.
Like that,
so although she got turned over, she got turned over by a very, very good horse. You knew they weren't going to step up and trip, and she does have an entry over 2.5. But the Arkle was always going to be the race for her. She gets the Mayor's Alliance in there, so she was a really solid bet. I'm not as keen as Andy to be with her now at the prices. One thing that has been mentioned there, she is worse off with Blue Lord now because she's been getting the Juvenile Alliance all season. She doesn't get that at Cheltenham, so it's only £2. But that £2 would make a difference in a very tight finish. I agree with Andy. I think I'm not sure she would have won comfortably because I think Blue Lord rather idled in front as well. But I thought she, coming to the last year, was the likeliest winner. I think Jack made a slight mistake there when he pulled his whip, and he just sort of lost contact with her, and they've been going along very nicely until then. She just got a little bit unbalanced coming to the last, and then threw in that jump that enabled Blue Lord to get past her and then cross her, which was the crucial aspect of the race. I don't think there's a huge amount between them. I agree with Andy. I'm not a huge fan of Blue Lord on that performance. I don't think he wins an Arkle jumping the way he did there. There's two horses that I like in the race. Edwardstone is absolutely rock solid, and the great thing about him, if you want to back him, is that all the wise guys would be against him. All the stats are against Edwardstone. He's had 3 runs at Cheltenham. He's been unplaced every time. He's trained by Alan King, who's had 86 consecutive losers at the Cheltenham Festival since Uxie's Orange won the Ryanair 7 years ago.
You're selling it well, this, Rory.
Yeah. No, but this is the whole thing. all the stats say can't win. Now, I like the stats when they point you in a certain direction, but sometimes, they're a very easy fallback for people who don't want to look at the form. And the form says Edwardstone is the best horse in this race. His wins have come in smallish fields, but he ran an absolute cracker. You could look back at the County Hurdle. If you take the view that he doesn't handle Cheltenham, look at the County Hurdle last season. He ran an absolute stormer there, giving weight to all but one of the horses in front of him, coming from further back than everything that beat him, and not beaten far at all in the end. The winner of that, he was given the best part of a stone to, who won a Grade 1 next time out. So that form is very, very good. He's always looked like he was going to be a chaser. He's also an 8-year-old. People will tell you 8-year-olds have got a negative record in this league.
Yeah, they just did, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of superstars though have won it as 8-year-olds who've maybe had an extra year on the sidelines, like Sizing Europe and Moscow Flyer, who would have run in the Champion Hurdle when the meeting was abandoned for foot and mouth. And he's very much in that category. I think he's benefited from having a little bit of time off. He's looked the finished article this season, whereas he used to be quite keen as a hurdler. He had lots of ability, didn't always channel it in the right direction, and this season he's been doing everything perfectly. I thought he was very impressive at Warwick last time out. I know it was only a 4-runner race, but all of those horses are useful in that contest, and he travelled and jumped superbly throughout. So I think he's got everything in his favour. The race will set up for him as well, and he will probably be third favourite at some stage between now and the race starting, because they will punt Blue Lord, particularly if the Irish win the first race as well, and they'll also punt Riviere de Tel, and Edwardstone, who's clearly the best horse in the race, who should be about 15-8, will touch 4-1, I predict. He might not go off at that price, but I think people will fall over themselves to take him on because the stats say that he's one to take on, and I think he is the best horse in the race. If he was 15-8 or 2-1, I'd probably leave him alone. but I think he will drift to a backable price, and I will back him.
Will you back him each way at that price, or win only?
No, I'd be happy to go win only. I'm not that much of a scumbag. The one horse I have backed each way here at the post is Coeur Sublime, because his form's a little bit up and down. He's had breathing problems, but he's been a very, very talented horse. He was placed in the Triumph Hurdle. He looked very, very good over hurdles last. He's changed stables a couple of times, but stayed in the same colours. He looked like he was going to win the Morgiana last season. Cruised up to take the lead at the last, and then didn't get home because his breathing affected him again. It was disappointing after that. But he's come back. He's moved to Henry de Bromhead this season. He's run well in his first couple of chase starts. Obviously, he's got loads to find with Riviere de Tel, having been third behind her at Christmas. He won easily at Goran last time out when he was basically, Rachel had to yank him back constantly through the race because he was going so well. So that form doesn't read particularly well, bad time figure. But he jumped well, and he got a bit of confidence from winning that. That was the first time he had a tongue tie back on this season. Clearly, he does need a tongue tie. Good ground will suit him. That's always. It's not so much he doesn't handle soft ground, but horses who have historic breathing problems tend to perform better in good ground because it puts less stress on them. So I can see him travelling really strongly and being one of the last off the bridle in this race. Whether he comes up the hill is open to debate. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if Henry de Bromhead has him, at an absolute peak. And he's one of the few horses in the race I can see taking a big step forward in what they've done already. He's in the Grand Annual as well, but I'd like to think this is the race they'll run him in. And I've been with him 25 to 1 and upwards earlier in the season. I don't want to go too much shorter, knowing that he does, historically has had that issue. But hopefully it won't bother him here, and I can just see him travelling really, really strongly as one or two of them fall away and getting himself into a winning position. Whether he's able to convert that, I'm not sure, but I think he'll hit the frame.
I believe now 14 to 1 best price as it stands at the moment. As I mentioned, all the bookies, not the exchanges, but the bookies up on the oddschecker grids are all no bet now. So if he does take up the other entry, you will get your money back. On then to the Ultima, the first handicap of the Cheltenham Festival. And we have plenty still in there at the moment. Death Duty 7 to 1, Does He Know 8 to 1, Noble Yates 9 to 1, Fantastic Ass 10 to 1, Fleur 10 to 1, Fullback 12s, Current Rambler 12s, Come On Teddy 14s, Schoolboy Hours, plenty of others 14s as well. Bit of guesswork, I guess, goes in here. Plenty of these, Andy, have entries elsewhere in the week as well. But at this stage, as I mentioned, if they do take up those other entries, you do get your money back. Any value for you? Have you had any bets in the Ultima?
I haven't as of yet. Vintage Clouds winning this race last year was a real stat buster, wasn't it? I think he was an 11-year-old. He couldn't be an 11-year-old. I think he'd had too many runs over fences. That you predominantly want to look at either novices or second season chasers. But the one thing he did have in spades was Cheltenham Festival form, and that's something that I think you probably is of benefit. I don't think it's in tablets of stone. So there's a lot of horses in this race that don't qualify on that score. One that does, of course, is Does He Know, who's one of the market leaders. He's already course and distance winner. He's a very game, likeable horse. I think when Kim Bailey's got a handicapped project on his mind, Imperial Aura, etc. They just come unstuck with one last year, didn't they? The horse who finished second to Vintage Cloud. That was a painful 6 minutes to sit through that last year when you look as though you got the winner all the way round, and then happy go lucky. Yeah, that was an absolute killer. That was to find that Vintage Cloud's come and done you. It's like of all the horses in all the world to come and do you, it was the one that had been around the block more than a tramp's dog. So you've got to consider Does He Know. But there's another one, if he gets in, and I don't know what the plans are, because I think he's in the Kimura as well.
There'll be a lot of horses coming out of this.
Yeah, he needs quite a few, but I'm a massive fan of Jericho Rock, who hasn't actually won yet this season, but he's run damn well in every single time he's turned up. He was second to Pat's Fancy, wasn't he, at Chepstow early in the season. That form has stood the test. I think Pat's Fancy is a really good horse and has got a chance in the 4 miler, but it's the 3 mile 6er now, isn't it? And I think he could be a horse Pat's Fancy next season for something like the Welsh National. And he chased him home at Chepstow, and then he ran second in the on Mandarin. Now that Mandarin time figure was absolutely astonishing. particularly if you compare it furlong for furlong with the 2 Mile Handicap Chase on the same card. And I wanted to follow that form, and the likes of Run to Milan and Nesta Park, and obviously Jericho Rock himself have really boosted that form line. He then went to Warwick and took part in the Classic Chase, and he was just up against a horse who got into an amazing rhythm up front, the thing of Emma Lavelles, and just got track position and just got away from him. But again, he ran up right up to his best in a period where David Pollard, I don't think, had a sighted of a winner for about a month, and he's been kept fresh for 59 days. So I presume that the target has either been this or the Kim Muir. Like I say, he's number 38 in the card. There's a good chance of getting, I think it's 24 max, isn't it, Rory, this one? So there's half a chance that 14 will drop out between now and Tuesday. And if he was to run in this, I'd be very keen, because the Pipe team have got a really good record in this race. Under what was he called? Umpertu. Similar kind of horse won this. So I think the 16's non-runner no bet for either race. I mean, if you go back in one or the other, I think he's going to run in one of them, I would have thought. Would make plenty of sense. So without, unnecessarily mentioning the horses for the sake of it, I'd be more than keen on him, Jericho Rock.
Jericho Rock, yeah, best price at the moment is 16-1 with a couple of firms as short as 12-1 elsewhere. Rory, how do you see the Ultima?
Yeah, I think the market is a bit upside down in this. I don't fancy the ones at the top. I'll give Does He Know a pass. I didn't think he wanted heavy ground. I thought he wouldn't handle that at Ascot last time out, and he ended up running out an impressive winner. He's always looked like he's got a lot of ability. The problem with Does He Know is that he's an absolute nutcase. He will. He's got slightly more chance of killing someone in the parade ring than he does of winning the race. He's always a massive handful before his races. So it's obviously a bit of a question mark how he will cope with the atmosphere at Cheltenham. He ran at the meeting last year, of course, but there was no one there. So that's a little bit of a worry. It looks like he's going for this rather than the National Hunt Chase, which he was in as well. So yeah, he's got a decent profile, and if the ground dries out, that will suit him as well. He's won here and good to firm. So the fact the weather forecast is now looking good is a positive for him. Death Duty is the worst gamble I've ever seen. It's just an awful. It's just Gordon Elliott said he was the best handicapped horse that he has, and I think what Gordon meant was he's the one that hasn't been crucified by the handicapper, because his mark is much the same as it is in Ireland. I think that's roughly what Gordon meant, and everyone sort of suddenly thought, oh, this horse has been laid out for it. It's not. The Irish trainers don't lay horses out for the Ultima. They don't care about the Ultima at all.
The Irish don't win it. I don't think they'll win it.
The runners that the Irish have in it tend to be either those who are weighted out of the Kim Muir. The Kim Muir has always been the big target for Irish staying handicappers at the festival
because of the amateur angle.
Exactly, and they've got the best jockeys for that as well. So it's possible an Irish horse will win this, but most of them who are in here are not really. They haven't been campaigned for the race. And it's best to treat them with a degree of caution. Those rated 145 or less are most likely to go for the Kim Muir. There's plenty of Gordon Elliott horses in there, but Death Duty is a terrible favourite. I like one at a big price, who, and I'm going to lose him now, T-Clipper. It has got a very interesting. He's a 25-1 shot. He's been confirmed for the race, which is a positive. He's got an interesting profile in that he was really impressive first time up at Chepstow on good to firm ground. Looked a great performer when he won that, and then he went up to Grade 2 company and just didn't really give his running at Newbury. He finished second, but that was the only two finishers in the end in that Berkshire Novices Chase. And then he went to the Cotto Star at Kempton over Christmas, and he was outclassed by the front two there. And he wasn't really put into that race. I didn't think he's just. It was more of a confidence booster. He jumped better than he had at Newbury, but he was well beaten in the end by Brave Man's Game. But of course, it means that he's got a reasonable handicap mark out of this. He'll definitely get into this contest, and he's got the right kind of profile. The horses, novice chasers tend to do well here because it's a lot harder for the handicapper to get a handle on them. And if you judge him on the form that he showed at Chepstow and how that has worked out, he looks very well handicapped, and I thought it was interesting he was put into this. I think it's the only entry he has at the festival, which is always interesting as well. And the owner's got a couple of horses in the race, and one of the other one's shorter than this. But I thought T-Clipper was an interesting one because, as I said, conditions are coming in his favour. This time last year, he was placed in really competitive handicaps at both Cheltenham and Aintree. He was third in the Coral Cup, and then he was third at Aintree as well, which shows that he can mix it off this kind of handicap mark. And he jumped like an old hand on his chase debut. Like a lot of horses who start off well over fences, up in grade, it's just fallen apart a little bit since. But this is obviously a drop-in class. He'll get in here with 10 stone 7 as it stands. Again, if you look back at previous winners of this race, you know, it's the up-and-coming horses who get in under 11 stone are the ones to watch as a rule. The exposed horses struggle to win this unless they've got previous form in the race. You get a few horses who come back year in, year out and do well. Village Clyde's obviously a good example last year. I think he was having his 5th run in the race when he won it. He'd been placed in it before. But yeah, T Clever I think is, you know, you're taking a bit of a chance because his last 2 runs are a little bit disappointing. But on the promise he showed first time out, and he put just a very good time figure there as well against, you know, it was a listed race. I think he would look very interesting in here, and I'm happy to take a bit of a punt on him at 25s.
Similar to Glory and Fortune in many respects, that profile going into a big handicap. He didn't disappoint at Kempton, but he was well beaten, wasn't he, on ground that didn't suit him. But if you go back to his, I think it was his Welsh champion hurdle for on good ground, he'd have a serious chance in that Betfair hurdle the other day, and of course up he popped at a big price.
So it looks like a similar approach. Run them in graded races where they're not going to do the business, and the handicapper is not going to raise them for that, and then you've found your way into handicaps by a circuitous route without having to do the old run it at Fakenham and finish 10th, which is a very crass way of trying to get a handicap mark for Cheltenham.
I'll have 50 pounds each way. T-Clipper please, 25 to 1 non-runner bet, thank you.
25 to 1 T-Clipper, as you say there, Andy, 25 to 1. For that one, Rory making a very good case there for the Ultima. Rory, will stick with you for the Champion Hurdle. This looked a few weeks ago like it might be a bit of a procession for Honeysuckle, who is the 4 to 7 favourite, but not so much anymore. Appreciate it. Looks like he'll turn up at 7 to 2. Tiapu proving very popular with many at 8 to 1. We've got Epatante, previous winner of this race, as discussed with Barry, 11 to 1. Adagio 16 to 1. Zanahir 16 to 1. 33 to 1 Bar. Are you falling into the camp, Rory, of being pretty keen to take on Honeysuckle?
No, I mean, listen, Honeysuckle might not win this race. And, you know, if you look back historically at great jumps horses, they don't go unbeaten through their careers. They eventually plateau, or they meet their match, they meet a better horse, or they just begin to sort of deteriorate and then they get beaten. But there's no obvious sign of that from her so far. She's unbeaten. Her best form puts her well clear of these, even though 1 or 2 of them are improving at the right time. I don't really have any desire to take her on. Also, with horses like her, I don't have any great desire to go steaming in at odds on. And I've always been looking at this race as you know, an each-way race for most of the season. Appreciated has been the subject of positive reports, but you know, he's only here because he was injured early in the season and couldn't go chasing, and that can't be a positive. You know, Willie Mullins is an exceptional trainer, and you definitely, you definitely respect his decision to come here, and the fact that the word from the yard is fairly bullish of late. But no horse has won the Champion Hurdle on seasonal debut. He's not taken on, you know, he's coming in here straight as a novice. You know, you're going back to a horse called Seneca in the 1940s. I have a horse whose last run was in a novice hurdle, who's won this before. So, you know, the stats really are against Appreciated, and you know, he's I don't want to call him one-dimensional as a hurdler, but you know, we're basically just looking at the way he's won the Supreme last year. It was very impressive. Again, 50 years of Supreme winners, however impressive they might have been, have produced no Champion Hurdle winners the following season. Amazing. And that's a pretty strong statistic as well. So the fact that you've got him in at 7 to 2, second favourite, you can't really back Appreciated to beat her. He may well do it, but there are plenty of negatives against him. So I think you have to go each way here. I don't really know what to make of Teapu. He did step forward to win the Red Mills last time out. He's going the right way, and he's a nice prospect, but he's the kind of horse I would tend to be against historically as a 5-year-old. I think he's a horse who might have a big part to play in this next year, and maybe because this, aside from the favourite, looks a weakish Champion Hurdle, he might be able to step in there. And we have seen that he'd have a reasonably similar profile to Espoir d'Alin. You know, he didn't.
Yeah.
He was a very good juvenile hurdle last year, but didn't come to Cheltenham and was looked after. So he's got that kind of profile, and he may well be able to come through and do it. But I thought the solid one, the price has come in a little bit of late, was Adagio. You know, he was knocked out in the betting for finishing second at Wincanton, and that was a tremendous performance for me because he was coming off an injury and he was up against a course specialist. And I thought he ran a really good race. To get to the front at all against Goshen in that race when Goshen had made the running and got across to the stands rail in the straight, I thought was a very promising performance. That made me more confident of his chances of making the frame in the Champion Hurdle. And yet he was, you know, he's a drifter in the betting straight after that because people tend to be very binary about what they expect of horses. You know, I've backed this for the Champion Hurdle, therefore it must win this Grade 2 or else I don't want to have it. And I spoke to a couple of people who'd cashed out their bets on him for the Champion Hurdle on the basis of that as well. I thought, you know, you need to have an idea of what you're expecting here. Yeah. I thought it was a very good run. He's tremendously consistent. Obviously, he's a 5-year-old, and that's, you know, you do have that. You don't get too many horses who've run on the Triumph Hurdle and then win the Champion the next year. Obviously, we've had a few catch it. Obviously, did the double, and you know, you get great horses like CU there and beating in the Triumph and coming on and winning this. And my normal opposition to 5-year-olds has kind of dried up a little bit this year because it's a different kind of race. His run in the Greatwood was a tremendous race. The Greatwood is a very good trial for the Champion Hurdle as well. If you're able to be competitive there, it shows that you can deal with whatever champion will throw at you. I don't think he's quite good enough to win a Champion Hurdle unless it falls apart a little bit, but I think he's, you know, you're getting around 20 still, aren't you? Or close to that.
16 to 1 best
16
price,
best price now, is it? That's still fair enough. I've backed him at 25s and 20s, and he's definitely value for the place part of that bet.
And I think you agree, don't you?
Yeah, he's probably one of my strongest bets on the card.
Have you got something to do with that 20 to 1 or disappearing?
No, nothing at all. I did toy with backing this horse after he ran in the Greatwood actually for the Champion Hurdle. I think he was 40s, 33s at the time, but I was really taken aback by that run. You know, for a juvenile, because he was only a 4-year-old up to the time, under 11-12 to run as well as he did in what looked a stellar renewal of the Greatwood. You know, time has told us as well that it's good form. Was a sensationally good effort, and it's in keeping with his course record. I think Rory's right, and that's the thing that I've looked at. A lot of these haven't run at Cheltenham yet. You know, your Tihupu's, your Tommy's Oscar, and one or two others. But this fella loves it. I mean, he could probably walk himself there, couldn't he? He's run there 4 times. He's won there. And he's finished placed in every other run, finishing second. Admirable runs as well at that, including his run behind Calixios when he beat Zana here. And what we've seen so far this season, I think he's probably gone forward, whereas Zana here, I think, is probably just flatlined. They're both in and around the same kind of price. I'd sooner have Adagio because of his trap form than Zana here. Like Rory, I was really pleased with his run the other day. He'd been off the track for, was it 90 odd days? And he come looming up there against Goshen. Jamie Moore probably couldn't get his breath. You know, he got the other two absolutely tailed off, including Favois, who ran well the other day in the race up at Kelso, finishing third to Cormier, miles behind. And it was only that lack of a run and the tenacious nature of Goshen on that ground in his backyard. Let's face it, Wincanton on a soft ground is his Champion Hurdle, and they rode him very much like he was. I thought it was a sensational effort. And of course, Tom Scudamore as well, immediately jumped the last and he recognised he couldn't win. He didn't beat him up to go and try and give him Adagio a particularly hard race. So the kind of job was done to get him the final preparations right for the Champion Hurdle. I think they'll bet quite aggressively on this race on the day as well, with the place terms and giving you a chance to back a few of the each way horses. And I presume that they'll go 4 places, some for them, maybe even 5, I don't know, but with 10 runners I think it'll be at least 4. It's an astonishingly good bet, 16 to 1, 4 places for a horse who's not finished out the first 2 around here. I think the bet without the favourite market's also quite good. I think
11 to 2.
11 to 2.
Yeah.
So you're basically betting 4 places there if you think Honeysuckle's going to be in the first 4, which barring miracles is going to happen. I think that's a good option as well because he could easily finish second.
Yeah. Normally does.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah. So there's lots of ways to skin a cat there without getting involved in the will she, won't she debate about Honeysuckle. Me personally, I think she's a bit short at 2-1. I think the exchanges are more in the the sort of 4 to 5, 8 to 11 area, and I think if you're gonna want to lay her, that's where you've probably got to go down that route to find out whether she doesn't win. And I've got a healthy regard as well for Tiupa as well. I'm probably going to perm the two together in some multiples, like you go 2 in this race, 2 in that, 3 in that. Try and get a few quid rolling on some other horses in races where you see I fancy 2 in a race. So yeah, I'm more than happy to play that project, Adagio each way, and put Tiupa in a combination multiple bet as well.
Yeah, form figures under David Pipe of first, second, first, second, 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 second. You don't get much more consistent than that. And as you add with Adagio, plenty of course form as well. So Adagio 16 to 1.
All tough races those that he's been in.
Yeah, he hasn't missed any dances. He's danced every dance, as they say.
16 to 1 and Tiupa there 8 to 1 best price as it stands at the moment. All firms currently 3 places, but as Andy mentions, that could change up until Tuesday. We'll move on then to the Mares Hurdle, where we've got Tell Me Something Girl 3 to 1 favourite ahead of Concertista at 4 to 1. Queen's Brook 11 to 2, Burning Victory 6 to 1, Stormy Island 6 to 1, Royal Kahala 7 to 1, Mrs Milner 10 to 1, Marie's Rock 10 to 1, as is Echoes and Rain 12 to 1 bar. And Rory, will come to you first for the Mares.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this fairly brief. It's not a particularly exciting race on paper this year. I'm not particularly keen on the favourite. And I'll tell you what I've done. I've backed Concertista, who is in this and the Mares Chase, and she's been Andy Poe's favourite for the Mares Chase. She's had a terrible preparation for that. And it's very un-Willie Mullins-like. She's won 2 Grade 2 chases against moderate opposition. She hasn't massively impressed me in doing it. She looks like she needs more practice over fences. And of course, she's as a novice who hasn't raced since December. She's up against really hardened mares who've got the form in the book, and she'll be giving weight to them because the trainers of the second and third, or the favourite and the second favourite now, because Concertista is on the drift for that race, have made sure that their mares don't pick up penalties. So Concertista would have to give weight to Ellie May, and she'd have to give weight to what's her name?
Mount Ida.
Mount Ida. In that as well, and I just think it's not really Willie's way of preparing one for that. So I've been half expecting a switch to this race for a while. It's interesting that she's confirmed for this. Not that gives you a massive clue with Willie, because he's confirmed one for the national.
Confirms everything for everyone.
He's not actually qualified to run for it. So, but I think all I've done is taken a bit of a swing. If she runs in this race, she's probably a 9 to 4, 2 to 1 favourite, maybe even shorter than that. So I've just taken all the prices about her. Willie said she's not running on this; she'll run on the Chase. But he keeps confirming her for the race. So that's the way I look at this. It's not a race that massively excites me. Otherwise, the likes of Martello Sky could run a decent race. She's a very genuine mare, but the ground's drying up too much for her. She handles heavy ground very well. So the fact that it's coming good is probably against her. Indefatigable, who I like, was disappointing last time out as well. So my outsiders aren't shaping up particularly well at the moment. So it's just a swing at Concertista, knowing that there's a fair chance she's not going to actually run on the day. But if she does, then I'll look super clever.
Concertista 4 to 1 best price at the moment, seen if she does run to be a 9 to 4 shot by Rory. Andy?
I do like this race. I thought Black Tees was a reasonable each way bet against the fancied horses last year, trained by Sir Gordon Elliott was Denise Foster, but under the umbrella of Gordon Elliott. Only 3 trainers have won this: Willie Mullins, Henry de Bromhead, Gordon Elliott. So probably can narrow down your sort of selections based on that. I certainly respect Tell Me Something Girl, and a lot of people who backed her, a lot of wise guys, shrewdies, whatever you want to call them, are all on this horse at big prices, identifying the fact that Henry's targeted at this particular race, and a season's gone relatively well without hitting the ball out of the park. But 5 to 2, I agree with Roy, looks plenty short enough given the strength in depth that we've got here. I think this is quite a good race. Lots of horses coming here with strong form lines. Concertista would be a real tricky one to contemplate if she parachuted in from the supposed target of the Mares Chase. I could do without her running really, because I do fancy one in this. I'll get onto in a second. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Queen's Brook, trained by Gordon Elliott. Don't think she's quite in the Apples J category yet, but I just like her consistency and her head carriage as well. Every time I've seen Queen's Brook, you just look at the way she gets her head down. she's a real massive trier. Of course, third behind Fernie Hollow in the bumper several years back. So she's got Cheltenham Festival credentials. And I like the way she's been campaigned this season, just 3 runs. Needed the run first time out heavy ground after a 300-odd day layoff. Then she beat Ciel de Neige, who's obviously, you know about number, he's won about 3 or 4 times over fences subsequently. And then she just caught out the other day. It was a rather surprising tactical switch on Burning Victory, who was well backed. They put cheek pieces on Burning Victory, and her jumping was a lot better for it, being out in front, not having horses around. So I don't know whether that forms a total red herring or not, but it's hard to see Burning Victory if you fancy her dominating this field, because you've got Heaven Help Us and other horses in there that like to make the running. So I don't necessarily, Stormy Island, that's the other one as well. So if you fancy Burning Victory, and a lot do, and I can still make a case out for her of sorts, she's going to have a totally different dynamic this time, jumping in behind, and that's always been her slight Achilles heel. Whereas Queensbrook doesn't mind being just held up in the pack and being tipped away. So all in all, I think Queensbrook's a really, really strong each way bet here. I know some firms are still 11-2. I think she'll be tight 4-1, 9-2 on the day. I mean, you're only talking about a point, but I'm definitely going to be sticking her in a lot of each way multiples. Like I say, I like the Adagio angle with and without the favourite, and there's plenty of other each way bets that we can talk about during the rest of the meeting. But yeah, I'll be amazed barring accidents if she's in the first 3 or 4, if bookmakers do go 4 places on the day.
Would you be concerned about the grounds if it ends up being good on the day?
Yeah, I think first day, I think they'll probably be about as good as it's going to be. You know, it's going to be good to soft. It should be absolutely ideal. She's won on yielding before. She's run well in a champion bumper when it was, you know, good to soft in places like that. I wouldn't want it the other way for her. I actually think heavy ground would be a concern, so somewhere right in the middle is ideal.
Queensbrook 11-2. You did take a mare's hurdle off a British trainer at the beginning, though. There's one
Don
other.
McKeon, of course, won the first
Don
one.
McKeon won the first one.
And Dan Skelton rather fortuitously won it.
Benny,
I'll take that on board.
Benny falling at the last.
That's Dan Skelton brackets.
Yeah,
Willie Mullins.
Exactly.
I think the general trend suggests it's going to be Willie Mullins, Emily
it
Bromhead or Gordon Elliott.
Yeah, Queensbrook 11-2, best price there. We'll move on to the Boodles Juvenile Handicap Hurdle, and a pretty interesting betting heat this, given we've got a horse in Gaelic Warrior at the top of the market who is seemingly there more to do with what has been said about him in the press and the media rather than anything we've seen on track so far. Yet to run for Willie Mullins, but of course there's powerful connections, Mullins and Rich Ritchie. 9-4 favourite. The tide turns 11-2. Fedor 7-1, who we don't expect to take up this entry. Champion Green 9-1 for Joseph O'Brien. Brazil 10-1. HMS Seahorse 12-1. Saint Segal 12-1. 14-1 Bar. And we spoke about this race in depth last week on our Irish pointers with Johnny Ward. Andy, so we'll come to you after we've heard from Rory, because the guys have probably heard from you. So a couple of questions here, Rory, I guess. Firstly, I mean, what do you make of this Gaelic Warrior gamble? And you know, does it open up an opportunity, I guess, for some value elsewhere in the race?
It will do on the day. There's not an awful lot of value because you've got an 11-4 favourite at the moment, because the overrounds, are just
very high.
Are pretty careful. But obviously, when you get declarations, then with a short price favourite, you're going to have some very big prices for horses who've got place claims. Gaelic, listen, he on his French form, he looks very well handicapped, and the suggestion is that his handicap mark is an error, because he's got a French handicap mark, and his French handicap mark would be considerably higher. Normally what the British handicapper does is he adjusts all the Irish marks, he doesn't adjust the French marks. So the French handicapper's given a horse a mark, they've almost always run off the same mark in the UK. Obviously they work in kilos in France and we work in pounds over here, but the suggestion is that that they've transcribed that incorrectly and they've ended up giving him a mark that's considerably lower than it should be based on his French form. So I can understand why he's short in the betting. I can also understand why he hasn't run, because if he did, once he's run, then he would get an Irish handicap mark, and then that would be open to be to adjustment. So this is just a pretty sneaky one. Willie knows this horse is well handicapped on what he's shown, and he doesn't mind winning handicaps with Grade 1 horses. The suggestion is that Gaelic Warrior probably is a Grade 1 horse, and I'm not going to knock him other than to say that this race throws up tough results. It's a big field. There tends to be plenty of hard luck stories in it. I'd always want to be looking at something at a big price. Last year's winner, well, in fairness, even if you're looking for a big price last year, you'd have needed 7 or 8 swings to get the winner at the very least. But I like one who's not guaranteed to get in. He's number 29 on the list, but he's definitely overpriced, and that's Silver Shade from Milton Harris. He was a good winner on his debut at Kempton, although his jumping was very novice-y. He wasn't a bad sort on the flat who stayed a mile and 6 for Mark Johnson. And he's joined Milton and he's won 2 out of 3. I'm not sure if he was outclassed or whether it just came too soon for him. The Triumph Trial at Cheltenham won by Pied Piper, but he finished 5th that day and never really got competitive. But he bounced back to form to win last time out, beating In Turn to Civila, who's got some decent form and who also won in the Cheltenham race before that. Now, there's some debate as to whether Silver Shade should have won that race because he was held up. He was coming through with a challenge at the second last. It was about half a length down when In Turn to Civila made a mistake and then lost his back legs coming away from the hurdle and lost a lot of momentum. He then came back and was beaten a length and a half at the end. You can argue that In Turn to Civila maybe should have won that race. But whatever you think about that, on the handicap marks, Silver Shade would have been £7 better off for beating the horse a length and a half last time out. So I don't really care whether the runner-up maybe might have won by half a length if he hadn't made his mistake. I think Silver Shade would have been the one to take forward for the race anyway. It's also worth pointing out that the Fontwell race was almost 2 mile 2, and because of the nature of Fontwell on soft ground, they go right round the outside there as well. So they would have covered over 2 miles and 3 furlongs that day. And I thought Silver Shade just got tired from the last. And when you're on the stands rail at Fontwell as well, you come past the exit to the back to the saddling boxes, to the parade ring, and a lot of horses sort of imagine that's where they're going back out again, so they jink there. So I thought Silver Shade actually won a little bit better than it looks. It's still decent form anyway, beating In Turn to Civila. That is, I think that's thrown out a subsequent winner as well in behind them that day. So I think that's a really good bit of form. The handicappers has overlooked it, in my opinion. My Tickety Boo was 3rd. Harlem Soul, who was 4th, won a novice hurdle at Wincanton in his next start. And that makes the form look a lot better. I think the handicapper looked at that and thought, well, this looks like a really weak race. But any horse who's beaten 40 lengths there, he's able to win a novice hurdle 10 days later, suggests maybe not bad form at all. In Turn to Civila, I think, is a talented horse as well. So Silver Shade, he's ever so slightly too well handicapped. He's not number 29 on the list means I think he needs 7 horses to come out to get in. And you'd imagine most horses confirmed for this race will be running at Field Door. I'd imagine probably goes Triumph Hurdle. Yeah. And you might get 1 or 2 more obvious dropouts, but it might be the Silver Shade ends up being a reserve for this or just misses the cut. But I don't really mind that. He was, what is he? He must be 33 or 40 to 1?
40 to 1 best price.
40 to 1 is a really, really good price about a horse who's as well treated as Silver Shade is. I know Milton Harris thinks a lot of him as well. Milton's very open about his horses. You know, some trainers tend to be a little bit, I don't want to give away too much here. And some are overly positive about their horses because they want to advertise how good they are at training them. And some of them are just very open, and Milton's very open. He thinks a lot of Silver Shade, thinks he's well handicapped, and I agree with him. So if he sneaks in at the bottom, I think 40 to 1 is a good price. And of course, if you're backing him at 40 to 1 on or no bet, your worst case scenario is you're getting your money back, and we're just hoping we get enough dropouts to get him in.
Yeah, Silver Shade there, 40 to 1 for Milton Harris, the one for Rory at a big price. And Andy, might not be a big price, but I know there's one in here that you really fancy.
Yeah, good spot by Rory and a big price on there. Not a bad time figure either. I'll just put a bit of chicken on the bone there. That was a good number, that Fontwell race. He's not a million miles off the top. We've got top rated horse here on the numbers 67 and that horse is 61 at Fontwell, so not bad for a 40 to 1 shot that. But yeah, I mean, we've got the classic Cheltenham talking horse here, haven't we? There's always one every year, and this is the one that does the rounds, and it's great for the sort of preview nights, and people embellish, you know, the sort of stories behind a horse like Gaelic Warrior. You know, he should have £10 more. He's been working with Vauban and he's been beating that, and obviously they haven't run him since, getting the handicap mark and all that kind of stuff. But you know, he's got to overcome 1 or 2 stats. He's got to overcome a big field at Cheltenham. I mean, it's all right working well at home. He's got to run around Cheltenham, and you know, does he come up a hill? We just don't know these things, do we? There's lots of question marks. He's also about Maxios as well, a stat I threw out there the other day. no British bred sire has ever won this race, and there's been 62 tries, and he's by Maxios. Like I say, I'll just throw it out there because I'd rather give it out than not. And Willie Mullins has never won this race either. So, you know, does 5 to still float your boat?
9-4 best price.
Yeah, 9-4. It wouldn't be for me. It's one of those ones I just think you just have to take on the chin. You just have to say, well, you know, the guys that knew the time of day were clearly too clever for us, and you just accept it. But I think the Tide Turns is the one I'd want to be with here. Gordon Elliott's won this race 3 times. He won it with a horse called Flax and Flare back in the day as well, who was 5th in the Spring Juvenile behind the mighty Arkle, but got beat 29 lengths that day. And the Tide Turns finished 4th this year in the best juvenile time figure that we've got, behind Vauban, who's a very short price favourite to win the trial, deservedly so as well. We've already seen the 5th horse, Icar Prince, bolt up next time out. And they probably came away from that race thinking, well, we haven't got a Triumph Hurdle horse, but we need to get him to the Boodles. So where do we run him? I know, we'll run him in the Red Mills. Can't win that race, but we can get him handicapped off of it. He travelled really strong into that race. He looked like he was going to win 2 out, and then on the heavy ground, they looked after him, and he finished a respectable 4th behind good horses. You know, Tia was 3rd favourite to win the Triumph, for goodness sake. That time figure was exceptionally good. He's come out of it with 137, which is, I think, a pound lower than when Aramax won it several years ago for going off 138, and he's a better horse than Aramax, I think. Funny enough, he's yet to run on the turf, on the flat. All his runs are on the all-weather. He 9 times for Sir Mark Prescott, and they were all on the all-weather. But you know, his 3 turf runs have been perfectly respectable over in Ireland. But I think he'll actually improve for the better ground, looking at him. So yeah, I'm more than happy to back him 6 to 1, 4 places. They're bound to go 5, 6 places on the day. That would really open up a good bet there. So there's lots of nice each-way bets I mentioned here that you think, well, what could possibly go wrong? So yeah, I'll be disappointed if he doesn't at least, you know, justify my confidence behind him.
11 to 2 best price. The Tide Turns, a strong one there for Andy, taking on the hot pot Gaelic Warrior.
I'm just reading Gordon Elliott's comments about the horse, which again, I think Gordon's a really honest trainer in his assessment of his horses. He speaks pretty highly of him and says particularly that he will be a better horse on good ground, which he may well end up getting on the
See the moon as well, isn't it? I mean, that would lead you to believe that anyway. So yeah, let's hope he's right. 11
to 2 as it is at the moment, maybe bigger once we get final decks in with that favourite at the top of the market. On then to the final race of the day on the Tuesday, the National Hunt Chase. We've got a joint favourite to the top, Statler and Run Wild Fred, both 11 to 4. Vanillier is 9 to 2. Farouk Dalain and Fury Road, both 8 to 1. Pat's Fancy on the ropes, 3 under through 5, or 10 to 1. Does he know 12 to 1, 14 to 1 beyond that? Andy, will come to you for the closer.
I don't mind Statler as a horse. I think he's improved since he's gone over fences, and he was good last time out when he beat subsequent winner Farouk Dalain. I just can't get out of my head. He's modest running last year's Albert Bartlett. Willie's had several similar horses like this that have come to the festival time and time again and not really done what they should do. And he's a bit inexperienced for a race of this nature. That's Money Nickel as well. Most of the winners of this race have had plenty of runs under their belt. By design, they are novices, so they're not going to run that many times. But I want something that's had at least 4 or 5 runs or something in around that mark, and he's only had 2.
Plenty of second season chasers have
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it tends to go for ones that have been around the block a little bit more than him. So at 2 to 1, again, I'd probably be more than happy to lay him than back him at that price. I've got a real healthy respect for Run Wild Fred. He was one of my first dips into the anti-post Grand National market this season. I backed him at 50 to 1 back in October, based on his runs in the Irish National last year and the Troy Town victory, of course. And he's been specifically targeted for this race. He's just a little bit leery. I mean, he almost walked through one down the back straight at Leopardstown last time out, which ultimately cost him. But he's the kind of horse with the experience behind him. He knows what he's doing. He can look after himself, for want of a better word. Yes, he's only won 1 in 9 or whatever it is, but he's basically turned up every time and run to a massive standard. He's guaranteed to stay you know, his Irish national run on good ground last year proves that. I'd rather be with him. I think he's a very, very solid, not to say favourite, but he's second favourite now. Thought he was a worthy anti-post favourite a few months back. And the other one that interests me at a price, I'm not quite giving up on him yet. He's on the ropes. I was really impressed with him when he won early on in the season at Limerick. He looked a horse tailor-made for this race. His campaign has slightly gone a little bit shape of the pair since then. He missed the break at Newbury in the old Hennessy, and he never really got competitive, but I thought he showed a hell of a lot of tenacity to finish fourth. He was disappointing in the Grade 1 next time out for sure, but there was a bit more life in him last time out. But the fact that he has run in Grade 1s suggests that they do think, you know, hold him in high regard, and he looks like being a runner where they could have had handicaps on their mind. So, and I think this test will really suit him. He looked for all the world the other day, like 3 miles around. Garin was insufficient for him. So yeah, I think I 10 to 1. I'll probably play him. So my strategy is going to be Run Wild Fred, and then a little cover bet on the ropes.
Run Wild Fred 11 to 4 on the ropes, 10 to 1. Best price, including sponsors of the pods, 888 Sports. Rory, how are you playing the last?
First horse I backed for the festival this year was Run Wild Fred for this race. Just, you know, blindingly obvious profile.
What price can we ask?
It wasn't a massive price. It was only 5 to 1, 11 to 2. The question was, the owners aren't mad to run horses in this race anymore. So Gordon had to convince them, but every time he's been asked about it, he keeps trying to hammer home that this horse is ideal for the National Hunt Chase, and he is. I mean, again, you look at the horses who've won this. I know you know, Willie's won it with one in the same colours as Statler before, Rathfinden, but he was a second season. Obviously, had lots of experience. Tiger Roll obviously had, you know, despite being a 7-year-old, he had plenty of experience. Ravenhill similarly, Galvin. You know, he was a second season novice who'd run really well at the festival the previous year. You can go back 20 odd years and this is the one. The further you go with chases, the more experience seems to count. Similarly, looking at the Grand National, you don't tend to look for unexposed horses for those staying chases. You look for horses who've proven that they can do it to a degree. And Run Wild Fred has got the perfect blend for this race. If you ran him and Statler in a 3-mile Grade 1 novice, you'd have Statler every day of the week, wouldn't you? But this is not your typical novice. It's an extended 3 mile 6, probably a big field. It's just a very different kind of race, and it will suit Run Wild Fred really well. Whereas, you know, Statler, Willie doesn't like coming here. You know, once he finds out how good a horse is, he tends to put them away for Cheltenham, and that works very well for certain races, not so well for others. And the National Hunt Chase is one where it doesn't particularly work. Now, he has won it with a horse with a similar profile in the past. It was a Back in Focus he won this, who didn't have an awful lot of experience, but also he's had several disappointments with horses who've got, you know, Grade 1, Grade 2 form and have looked the best horse in the race and haven't come up to scratch on the day. So I'm more than happy to have Run Wild Fred here. He's a skinny enough price now, but it's very hard to knock a hole in him. Yes, he made that one dreadful mistake at Leopardstown. Didn't bother him though. No. That's the weird. And he did not look at the fence at all. He just walked straight through it.
He didn't lose any ground, did he?
No, exactly. And he just carried on quite happily. It probably cost him a little bit in terms of his finishing effort, but he didn't turn a hair. He's one of those horses who will just turn up and do it. As you said, we know he stays 3 mile 6 anyway. He's got form in the top staying handicaps. It just ticks in all the boxes. Simple as that, really. So he's very hard to get away from for me.
Run Wild Fred, a double pick for the guys in the lucky last on the Tuesday at the Cheltenham Festival. Just about done with our day 1 preview. We'll be doing our day 2, day 3 and day 4 previews after this, so do look out for those. But before we move on, I'm going to come to you both for your nap of the day, just your best bet of the day. Rory, will come to you first.
Well, I got 2 that I really fancy that might not run, and I think it's probably too cheeky to do that. So I will go in at SP with Edwardstone, or sorry, you know, best morning price Edwardstone in the Arkle.
9:30 a.m. Tuesday morning.
But when do they go best? About 11 o'clock. Okay. They'll be pushing those prices out. So yeah, whatever price he is, sort of mid morning, will be value when the time.
Set your alarms, Andy.
I don't think Rory's going to get 4-1, by the way, about Edward Stone. I don't think he's quite going to go.
Is that your nap, that Rory doesn't get us 4-1?
He won't get 4-1, I guarantee you that. I'm really torn here because there's a hell of a lot I do like each way. Which is the best value of the ones I've mentioned? Is so difficult. School of thought.
Too many good things.
Well, they've all got a similar shape to them, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, they're nice races to bet in. But I'd probably, the one I'd have the most confidence that, barring accident, should be in the frame would be Queensbrook. I think that 11-2 at the moment, obviously it's 11-2 3 places, but even if you got 5-1 4 places on the day, don't think you'd be too far wrong with that.
There you go. Queensbrook and the Mayor's the one for Andy. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this podcast, or watch this video preview and listen to the podcast. We're about to record Wednesday, Thursday and Friday previews, so if you've enjoyed this, do subscribe to the oddschecker YouTube page where you can find those previews there and plenty of other content as well. Thank you very much to both Andy and to Rory for sharing their thoughts. Thank you to 888 Sport for sponsoring the show, and to their ambassador Barry Geraghty for joining us at the top of the show as well. Hopefully it will be a first day of the festival that lives up to our expectations, and please do ensure that at all times you're gambling responsibly.